Democratic Party. I have a critique of the milquetoast character of the Democratic Party.
Okay.
When you talk about the plantation of the Democratic Party, I'm with you wholeheartedly. I've talked about the Obama plantation. We can talk about the Clinton plantation and so forth. Now, I come right back and say, there's a Trump plantation too. All of these politicians, all of these parties have their plantations.
Well, I'm not,
and I'm not a party person in that sense.
I don't tell people that you can go anywhere and hear me speak. There is nowhere where I tell people that they should abandon the Democrat Party and go to the Republican Party.
But you got a critique of the Democratic Party, Democratic leadership.
Oh, 100%.
Absolutely.
I do. And Republican leadership as well. I mean, there are people in the Republican Party I still have absolutely no respect, God bless his soul, for John McCain, the Paul Ryan types. I regularly critique those people too, but it doesn't make the headlines, right? So, I mean, I critique both. What I advocate for is independence. And particularly government independence and shrinking government. I believe in free markets and a limited government structure. That's pretty much what I believe. And yeah, I'm painted as this horrific monster. I mean, you saw it after our debate. Like, we had a debate, and it's like, headlines, big explosion. That's not how I felt ending that debate. That's not how you felt. I emailed, tried to get him on the show, but that's what they need. They need to make it seem like we're constantly at war.
Well, you're a huge threat to the left.
They sensationalize these kind of things all the time for their own ends, for their own gain. No, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go right ahead.
No. And I think Candace is a threat to the left because she's bringing blacks to Trump, and without the black vote, the DNC is done forever. Can you maybe explain what Blexit is?
Yeah, so I started the black exit from the Democrat Party we've seen pretty much the same thing. The Democrats, it's undoubtedly have taken advantage of the black vote over the last 6 decades. That is not, you cannot question that. And any black person in good conscience that sits down and says that the Democrat Party has not taken advantage of the black vote, in my opinion, is a bad moral character. And you have to watch those bad faith actors. To me, Blexit is about reminding the black community that we are staunchly conservative. We are conservative. You cannot untether the black community from our faith. I grew up in a very Christian household. You cannot untether the black community, although the government has systemically attempted it, from the family. I grew up and my grandfather was all about the family. These are largely conservative principles now, as you have the left is advocating really for the disruption of family. Men can be women and women should be men, and kids should pick their gender. And if you Google, this is a real thing, if you Google straight couples, all that returns back to you are gay couples. And they say there's something wrong with you if you believe in the nuclear family. And they're trying to grow government. And we've already experimented with that in the black community. We've seen that more government has earned us more heartache over the last 60 years. You can look at any statistic. Illiteracy rates in black America, they're not serving us in terms of the Department of the Education. You know that, I know that. The breakdown of families, single motherhood rate at an all-time high at 74%. You know that, I know that. So how can we stand behind people that are advocating for more government? Handouts. $22 trillion into the welfare system. Black Americans are poorer today than when they started giving out welfare in the beginning. So my perspective is just, we gotta try something different, and that something different is getting up off of our own 2 feet, putting our families back together, starting our own businesses, and that is a free market capitalist perspective, which lands me on the side of conservatism.
But you see, exactly, but I think the challenge here is, because both of us share a deep Christian faith. Both of us share a profound commitment to not just our family, but our loved ones. And both of us recognize that when the issues of integrity, honesty, decency, generosity, that just cuts across race, gender, sexual orientation, national identity. Those are just spiritual and moral values. But I think the deep disagreement is, and I think Charles Murray and others have pointed this out, that the impact of the market on working and poor parents, no matter who they are, has been devastating. When you've had profits quadrupling at the top and you got wage stagnation for 40 years, how are you going to be able to keep your family together when 2 or 3 of you, when you do work, you still live in poverty? This is where wealth inequality comes in. And see, when you talk about free market capitalism, if we had a free market capitalism, that's one thing. We've got a corporate dominated.
We have crony capitalism.
Exactly. It's crony, it's predatory, 1% at the top. No matter what color they are at the top, even though they're disproportionately vanilla, but we shouldn't have bailed out the banks. We would agree with that. No,
totally
absolutely.
We need real capitalism, free market capitalism, not crony capitalism.
Well, I would just say we need a fair society, whatever it takes.
Right.
But how do you do that? I don't understand.
Well, one is you have to have conversations, to be honest, to put a spotlight on what is not talked about. And if you
Like
have
CEOs'
taboo
salaries?
issues that you're unable to interrogate and question, then you can't have a conversation. And part of the dialogue is we got this little narrow conversation between a Republican Party, most of which is tied to big money. You got a Democratic Party that's tied to big money, but acts like it's in the diversity and so forth. And by diversity, what they mean is symbolic representation of well-to-do black and brown and yellow and women folk at the top, when the vast majority of black people and white and women are catching hell. And they're supposed to live vicariously through the success of these celebrities at the top, you see. And so in that sense, you just have to be honest.
He's right.
It's hard to have a candid conversation
Right.
about these things.
But part of that's our fault. So I take the perspective, so what I believe in above anything else is personal responsibility. So I don't look externally and say that everything that's happened to black America is not our fault.
I agree.
Right? We
I
have
agree.
people that, yes,
I agree.
and this has to do with the breakdown of family. When you remove the father from the home, that's why I'm so strong about dads being in the home. Those kids will pursue that paternity elsewhere. So we're seeing black kids turn to the streets. They're turning to Jay-Z, they're turning to hip hop, and they're idolizing these people. And these people are taking them in a direction that's not helpful to them, right? So the majority of the, we know, for example, California, 75% of black kids can't pass a literacy exam. They can't read a book, right? But if you ask them trivia questions about Jay-Z and Kanye and rappers like T.I. and Killer Mike, they'd be able to come back to you
Or
on
you
that.
put them in the studio and their intelligence, and some of them have a genius that's undeniable.
Right. So my thing is that those decisions, like us taking, welfare incentivize that bad behavior in terms of removing fathers from the home. We have to be smart enough and wise enough to understand that and to turn that down. The answer to all of these problems is not more government solutions. You can't say the government did all of this and now we need more government to correct it. That doesn't make sense. That to me is the definition of insanity. Trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
But part of it is, though, is that our precious black brothers and sisters who are poor and working class need exactly what you and I have access to, which is some jobs with a livable wage. They need access to some resources so that their conception of dignity is also tied to responsibility.
Right.
You
But
see?
we have to
and that's what we haven't been able to do,
Right.
for the most part. And even when you generate a lot of jobs, it's not jobs with a living wage. Even when you have access to the housing market, it's hard to get the housing that is adequate, especially given the market taking over, the gentrification that's taking place, people unable to gain access to neighborhoods. See, I grew up in a neighborhood. I didn't grow up in a hood. Now, we were broke as the Ten Commandments financially, but it was still a ghetto. It wasn't a hood. It was a neighborhood. You know Donny Hathaway's Ghetto. When he sings that song, and he and Leroy Hudson wrote the Ghetto, they talking about love, affirmation, as well as poverty, but it was not victim mentality at all. Curtis Mayfield was singing, he's singing about the ghetto in Chicago. He's not singing about a victim mentality at all.
Right.
He's talking about dignity, resilience, and struggle, but you would admit the poverty was overwhelming. That's partly a result of the history of the country. Slavery, Jim Crow, James Crow, American terrorism, lynching, and so forth, you see. So that the stress on personal responsibility, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
But there has to be some structural realities that allow people to gain access to jobs and health care and resources.
And I completely agree with that, and I think that that's where my limited government perspective comes from. We have to, this is why I support Trump. Peeling back on regulations, I think, is the most important thing that he's done in office. It becomes impossible for an entrepreneur, like I had cousins that live in the projects, who, I want to start a food truck. And then they go and they figure out how they can start a food truck, and there's about 80,000 government regulations and steps preventing them from doing that. So it de-incentivizes them. Now they no longer want to start a food truck, and this is what I love about Trump. So people are caught up in I don't like the way he speaks, I don't like his decorum. I like his policies, I like what he's doing. And so I call myself a Trumplican. I like Trump. If the Democrats had a candidate that was talking the way that he was talking, then I would vote for that candidate as well. But I think he's the only person that's sort of disrupting exactly what you're talking about and actually presenting more opportunities. And that's a fact, because now we have the ever in this country lowest ever black unemployment. So you can say it's not enough money
That's
to
true.
support the households.
We give Trump credit for that.
Right,
We
but you
give
can
the
say there's
brother
not
credit
enough money to support the households, but that's decisions that are being made. So you're a single mother and you have 3 kids. Well, of course that job is not going to be able to support your household because there are other decisions that you're doing where it's not meant to support a household. One individual is not meant to raise 3 kids by herself.
Though, and you tell me what you think. One of the contradictions in terms of any support of Trump is he's got a $750 billion military-dominated budget that goes straight to the big marketeers. Both Democratic Party and Republican Party voted for it. That's not limited government. See, when you expand the military budget, you are expanding government.
Okay, so I would disagree with you. So this is when I say limited government, I mean what do you believe is the function of a government?
The function of government is to protect its citizens.
That's the first thing you just said. So that's exactly, I agree with you 100%. So I'm comfortable.
But that means you're not for limited government to the degree to which the military needs to protect us.
No, but that's where I want them to be limited to. I don't want the government trying to raise our children, which is what you and I were talking about off camera. When they step in and they say, now we're going to regulate this, we're going to regulate that. That to me is a government that's overstepping. But when they're limited to military, that's exactly what we need the government for, to defend and protect.
61 cents of every dollar going to the military-industrial complex, and those oligopolies and monopolies are making billions of dollars, some of it waste. Would you would agree some of it's waste in the military?
Listen, yes. The government, nothing the government does sufficient. I agree.
If we could isolate it to the $750 billion and we were all fighting that the $750 billion was too much, that would be a great place to be.
Right.
But I think we're pissed off about all of this other crap.
But it's all
like
the other
the trans
stuff.
thing is going to be the end
of
black support for the left.
I mean,
because they're giving hormone blockers to kids.
Our precious trans, there's a small group of human beings who are the most vulnerable. They're demonized the most. They have least amount of power.
They're covered in magazines.
They're not demonized.
Everyone wants their kid to be one. It's the hot new thing.
That is the one group that is killed more by vigilantes among our citizenship.
Not vigilantes, the gangsters they were dating. They're drug addicts who are hanging out with bad boys. They're dating MS-13 and Bloods and Crips.
And let me tell you why I'm not talking about these individuals. They're now trying to make this a rule in school that teachers tell the kids in grade school, we're talking about K through 5, that they're allowed to pick their genders. That's where I have a problem with it, okay? You live your life, you want to dress as a woman, you want to dress as a man, God bless you. I believe that this country should protect personal liberties. 100%, I agree. I will never have an issue with that whatsoever, okay? But when you get to the extent now that you're demanding, that I now have to recognize people, that a grown man wearing a dress, I have to use the right pronouns, or I get fined or go to prison, which is actually happening in states like California, okay? That's ridiculous. So because I have 2 eyes and I call somebody the correct pronoun, I can get in trouble, right? And secondly, introducing it into the school system, which is over-sexualizing children at a young age, telling them they can pick.
That's the media and market doing that
100,
too,
I agree, 100% agree.
Money again from the top.
That is when something goes from a personal freedom to infringing upon mine. Okay, I don't have to raise my kids to believe that they can pick their gender because they can't. I feel bad for people that suffer from gender dysphoria. Both of those two ideologies can exist in the same.
But certainly we've got to protect personal liberties.
100%. Wear a dress. I say, guys, if you want to go put on a dress.
Yeah, no one wants to make that illegal.
But I mean, it's not. You got the Amish, you got the Mennonites, you got the Baptists, you got different groups in religion, different groups in culture, different Muslims, Mexicans. Make sure personal liberties are protected.
Always.
No matter what.
I agree.
Now, I don't know about this dictate about the teachers telling the students. You're talking about in first grade, second grade?
Yeah, and they're not allowed. They can call them in school. In school, they're allowed to call your son. You could not know your son's going to school, and they could be calling her all day by a different name. They are no longer required to tell the parent, because now they're protecting, and that to me is really crazy stuff, and that's what I speak out against, which gets me earned as a hate monger. And I'm going, do you understand?